The Desert Treasure 2 panic buying and selling has finally calmed down, so we can see exactly what's happening with the Scythe, T-Bow and Tunic and Shadow. This week we also get to see how the new items are doing, plus the votes are in the Forestry poll and the results were somewhat unexpected, meaning another bunch of items will be going up in price, apart from one very popular item that instead is going to be plummeting. But first, as always, there's a bond hidden within the video and the first person to find it and timestamp it with their username gets it. So the Scythe has always been that unlucky item that updates are just unkind to, and Desert Treasure 2 was no different. Even though it's the best in slot of the Duke, the mechanics of the fight mean that half the battle is creating potions and the other half is killing the boss. You can poison him, use thralls, venge, recoils, hell, you can even kick him to death. The actual fight is very short and the Scythe is only slightly better than the Arclight, which is essentially free, and the Fang, which is up to 40 million GP after the update. The other reason it's gone down in price is the hoarding that happened before the update, and this comment from the last video called it absolutely spot on before it even happened. Unless you're going for that axe, you only really need to buy one weapon for whichever boss you want to farm. Unlike a raid, you don't have to buy the best weapon at every single boss. It's also facing competition from the soulreaper axe now, so whilst the Scythe has only dropped 40 million GP since the release of Desert Treasure 2, it seems likely it will continue on the current trajectory of falling slowly in price over time until it finds its new level. The one weapon that was hit the hardest was the T-Bow, and it's down over 100 million GP, with it only being second best at one of the bosses, but I wouldn't give up on this one just yet. The money for the new bosses is already falling, and if you look at all the best money makers out there, the Twisted Bow is best in slot for some part of every single one. Plus the Chambers of Xeric where you get the Twisted Bow is also way down on the list these days, meaning less players are going there and getting more of them. Add in the fact that the chances of getting a T-Bow as a drop are also significantly lower, with a 1 in 1000 chance of getting one in a raid where you get 30,000 points. Compare that to the Tombs of Amaska at level 300, which gives a Tunic and Shadow 1 in 536 completions, or 1 in 171 at level 500. Whilst the confidence in the market is driving the price crash on the T-Bow, it's already showing signs of recovery, and I wouldn't be surprised if it continues to start going back up in price soon, as it has done pretty much for the last 12 months. But the biggest winner overall has been the Tunic and Shadow, up over 100 million GP, and ironically the item people were most worried about before the update. Purely because Virtus Robes gives a magical boost but only on Ancients, and the Shadow has a built-in spell. Whilst understandable, as I've said before, all of the best weapons have a built-in spell or get their DPS using a Tomb of Fire on the standard spellbook, so it was never really going to affect the Shadow being the best magic weapon in the game. In fact, the special effect of tripling the magic damage boost that you get from armor literally guarantees its future as one of the best weapons in the entire game. As new armor is released, like the new Mage Ring, whilst every other item got a 2% boost, the Tunic and Shadow got a 6%. Can you really imagine how powerful a weapon would have to be if it was to ever be better than the Shadow? I love both the Fang and the Shadow, but the mechanics seem to have been a big mistake, especially when the Fang is better at one of the bosses on Slash than the Blade of Saldor is. So the only thing realistically likely to ever crash the prices of these is just how many people are doing the Tombs of Amaska, which is bringing tons of the weapons into the game. For the last few days, Virtus Robes have been going up in price and seemingly have found their level. I've seen this before with new items that are released, and it usually means the items are more popular than was expected, and people hold off buying these new items because they don't want to buy crashing items, so once they reach this level, it's quite usual for them to actually start going up in price. My only worry with these is just how quickly you can kill the bosses and how many pieces are coming into the game. It's a huge risk, but could Virtus just be about to spike in price? The soulreaper axe is also following a similar trend. It's best in slot against Vardorvis, which I don't think anyone was expecting. It also has huge KO potential in PvP, but also makes you far more vulnerable to dying yourself, and to get the best out of it, it encourages you to risk a lot of high price strength items. So good luck predicting if this thing will go up or down in price because it has so many pros and cons. The Bellator ring, which is the new Warrior ring, and the Ultra ring, which is the new B ring, are almost identical prices. I think we all knew the Bellator ring was going to be far more useful than the Warrior ring ever was, due to the strength bonus and the much higher slash accuracy, but I didn't see them being anywhere near to the same price, and in many ways, I still don't. Against the new bosses they're practically equal, and in fact the Bellator ring is marginally better. But that is down to the fact that they're both weak to slash, but not so weak to it that you don't need accuracy, and the Dragon Warhammer is practically useless. Under those very specific circumstances, the Bellator ring is actually the better ring by a tiny amount, but apart from maybe the odd niche place, nowhere else in the game is that realistically happening. These are all the bosses that the Scythe was best in slot for, and this is almost always because a boss either has no slash defense, or after you hit it with a ton of Dragon Warhammer specs a bunch of times, it has practically no defense at all. When the defense of any creature is this low, you don't need any more accuracy, so purely strength bonus is always the meta. As people start to move away from these new bosses and back to Tombs of Amascut because it's better money, the price of the Bellator ring will probably fall considerably. Looking at the price of all the original rings, they've literally fallen off a cliff because of how rare the new rings are. Whilst they require the old rings to create them, if there aren't a lot of these coming into the game, we're simply not using enough of them to drive the price up, and instead those that were buying them before the update for a flip have realised this and are selling them, crashing the price. The last thing I wanted to look at from the Desert Treasure 2 update was the effect Virtus robes have had on Ancestrals. As soon as DT2 came out, Ancestrals crashed in price whilst people waited for the impact. They didn't drop too much though, and they seem to have stabilised recently, as the reality is Virtus only overtakes Ancestral in PvP, and even then only a small number of PKs because not many players go out risking Ancestrals, which is worth hundreds of millions of GP. By the way, if you haven't bought your bonds for Deadman mode yet, which is less than 2 weeks away now, I suggest you get them soon. I'm releasing a few videos on it and how you can make absolute bank in this game mode in the next week or so, but not only is it extremely popular, but doing something called muling encourages players to bond up second accounts, and bond prices I imagine are gonna go up a lot. So the Forestry Part 2 poll has just finished and I'm absolutely shocked that everything passed the poll. The update's been getting so much heat lately and negative comments that I was convinced it wouldn't. In fact, I specifically waited to do this video because of this poll, but it seems like most players want it, but the ones that don't really hate it. Two-handed axes will be out and dragon axes are already starting to go up in price again. If you remember last time, they doubled in price, and then when two-handed axes were not in the first part, they crashed back down again. This time they're likely to go up again, and in all probability will do the same and crash back down again, but there is a small chance this time that everyone wants to try a two-handed axe, creating a lot of demand, but if not, it should be an easy flip. This time we will get to test part 2 of Forestry, and based on our feedback they may change absolutely anything. Last time this happened they completely scrapped the prayers from Desert Treasure 2, so whilst I believe you should make good money on the following items, be a little bit cautious as anything can still happen. One part of this update is that you can now train fire making AFK, similar to how you could add logs to a fire in RS3 by the sounds of it. The AFK training method is likely to be very popular, and given that it gets you a third of the XP you would normally get, it means players will use up far more logs fire making. You may want to wait for this one though, as the price of most logs are currently yo-yoing, because whilst we're using a lot more of them, equally we're getting more as people try out Forestry. Long term though, two-handed axes get you less logs, the Forester's shop costs us logs to buy various items, some players are just doing the Forestry events for woodcutting XP now instead of actually chopping trees, and with this many players burning more logs, long term it still looks good that log prices will go up. In part 2 there's also going to be a bunch of new events, most of which you need to create items for, similar to the Be on a Stick. These here are all of the items that will be required in the new events. As we've seen before, we don't use a ton of them in the event because they don't really happen that often, but even still there will be some demand for them which will increase the price a bit. The biggest impact though will be 3 specific items that affect every single player in the game. One thing that did pass the poll was a voucher that you can get in Forestry that gives you 2 planks for the price of 1. Now, I've checked out this is written in a few different places just to make sure, and it does sound like it's not just saving you the price of the extra log, but also the sawmill price too, which is the main cost of a plank. I can't find confirmation, so I'm maybe 95% sure on that one. If this is the case, you'll get twice as many planks for the same price at the sawmill. So if we half the cost to make 1 plank and add on a 200 GP profit that you typically make per plank, each plank in future should cost around 1100 GP on the GE plus whatever the voucher costs. Of course that part is the great unknown, but it's safe to say that the price of mahogany planks in future will be less and could be anywhere between 1100 GP and the current price of 2000 GP. Oak and Teak are likely to go down too, but not by quite as much. What makes me laugh with Jagex though is they create GE tax to remove excess GP from the game, and Forestry to create an item sync for logs, only to then release sawmill vouchers that do the exact opposite. Finally, this week is something that I notice always seems to happen before Deadman mode. If you think this mode is just for PvPers, it really isn't, and it is without doubt the easiest way to make bank in this game, and I'm currently working on a video showing you every which way that you can do it, what to avoid, where the safe zones are, and how not to risk anything in the process. I even know someone who has a friends chat where you can safely trade over any money that you make to 07, and that video will hopefully be out on Sunday. But last year I made 700 million GP in 5 days, and nothing I did was difficult. PvPers can't get every item they need for themselves, so many will pay you to get things for them at a lot higher price than they are currently in the GE. For example, last time I got paid 200 million GP for an armor chain skid, over 200 mil for an armor crossbow, and the drop rate in Deadman mode is increased by 4 times the amount. Anyway, you'll notice that the price of many high price items start to fall in the run up to the game mode, as well as at the start of Deadman. This is down to players selling things in the main game to buy things in Deadman. But then as a lot of players start returning to the new game after a week or two, and those that made a lot of money from Deadman start to spend it, the price of items goes back up. It will probably be the safest flip that you can do, because you'll be able to see the same trend for every high priced weapon and armor in the game, if as expected it happens as it usually does. As always, predictions are just that. I'll never be right on everything, and Jagex can change any update at any given moment. Let me know your thoughts though. The more of us that put our heads together for the future updates, the more likely we are to all get it right and make a ton of GP on future investments.